Admiral Zethkari's mandibles clicked in amusement as the human delegation presented their ship specifications. The holographic display showed a crude, boxy vessel that looked more like a cargo hauler than a warship. Around the War Council chamber, representatives from the hegemony's most advanced species exchanged knowing glances. "This is what humanity brings to our alliance?" asked Commander Veltar, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. "Their frigate has the aesthetic appeal of industrial waste." The human admiral, a weathered woman named Sarah Chen, maintained her composure. "The UES Defiance may not look impressive, but she's built for one purpose: to fight and survive." Zethkari's four eyes studied the specifications with barely concealed disdain. The human ship was smaller than their destroyers, with armor that seemed impossibly thick relative to its size. Its weapon systems were primitive kinetic launchers, rather than the sophisticated energy arrays favored by advanced civilizations. Most amusing of all, it appeared to have been constructed from salvaged materials and repurposed components. "Admiral Chen," Zethkari's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into flat diplomatic tones, "we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm. However, given your species' recent emergence onto the galactic stage, perhaps a support role would be more appropriate when the Devourers arrive." The Devourers, a mechanical swarm that consumed entire star systems, had been approaching hegemony space for months. Every military strategist agreed that superior technology and coordinated fleet tactics would be humanity's salvation. The idea that these upstart mammals, barely 2 centuries into space travel, could contribute meaningfully to the defense was laughable. Admiral Chen's jaw tightened. "With respect, Admiral, the Defiance and her crew have seen combat. We know what we're capable of." The assembled commanders chuckled, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony of sounds. Humanity's combat experience consisted of putting down a few pirate raids and settling minor territorial disputes with equally primitive neighbors. They had never faced an existential threat like the Devourers. "Very well," Zethkari conceded, with magnanimous authority. "You may position your vessel in the reserve line. Try not to interfere with actual military operations." 3 weeks later, the Devourer fleet arrived at the outer rim of the Proxima defense grid. Long-range sensors revealed the horrifying scope of the enemy force. Thousands of geometric vessels, each one a masterpiece of destructive engineering. Their hulls absorbed sensor pings, their weapons carved through space-time itself, and their coordination was flawless. The hegemony fleet moved to intercept with textbook precision. Zethkari commanded from his flagship, a kilometer-long dreadnought bristling with quantum disruptors and gravitational lances. Beside him flew the pride of dozen worlds, ships that had taken centuries to design and decades to build. The battle began with long-range exchanges. The hegemony's advanced weaponry struck the Devourer formations, but the enemy vessels seemed to adapt in real time, their armor configurations shifting to minimize damage. Worse, the Devourer's response was devastating. Entire hegemony squadrons vanished in bursts of exotic radiation. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with growing panic, "we're losing ships faster than we can engage targets. Their adaptation rate exceeds our tactical projections." On the display, green dots representing friendly forces winked out with alarming frequency. The Devourers pushed forward inexorably, their weapon systems learning and evolving with each exchange. "Fall back to defensive positions," Zethkari ordered. "Implement Protocol 7, rotate weapon frequencies to prevent adaptation." But Protocol 7 failed, so did Protocols 8 through 12. The Devourers learned faster than the hegemony could adapt, turning their greatest strength, technological sophistication, into a vulnerability. That's when the human frigate broke formation. "What is that idiot doing?" Veltar demanded as the Defiance accelerated past the retreating hegemony ships. The ugly little vessel flew straight toward the Devourer vanguard. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "All ships, this is Defiance. We're going to show you how humans fight." The human ship opened fire with its primitive kinetic weapons. Simple, railguns that hurled chunks of metal at relativistic speeds. The projectiles were crude, unguided, and should have been easily countered. But something impossible happened. They connected. The Devourer vessels, so perfectly adapted to energy weapons and exotic physics, had no defense against plain iron moving at 30% light speed. Their adaptive armor, designed to deflect plasma and absorb radiation, crumpled like paper before solid matter moving with kinetic fury. Impossible, Zethkari whispered as the Defiance carved through the enemy formation. Their weapons are too primitive to. That's exactly why they work. Admiral Chen's voice cut through his confusion. Your ships are technological marvels, but the Devourers can adapt to marvel. They can't adapt to a chunk of steel moving fast enough to crack a moon. The human frigate spun and rolled through space, its ungainly design suddenly making sense. Those thick armor plates weren't just protection. They were ablative layers designed to absorb impacts while keeping the ship fighting. The boxy hull wasn't aesthetic failure, it was pure functionality. Every surface optimized for survival rather than elegance. The Defiance took hits that would have crippled a hegemony cruiser. Energy beams scarred her hull, exotic weapons tore chunks from her armor, but she kept fighting. When her railguns overheated, she switched to backup systems. When those failed, she fired manually loaded projectiles through breech-loading tubes that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Sir," the tactical officer gasped. "The human vessel is using chemical explosives." The Defiance had closed to knife-fighting range, launching primitive rockets and firing what appeared to be oversized shotgun shells. Against any civilized opponent, such weapons would be useless. Against the Devourers, they were devastatingly effective. More human ships began breaking formation, destroyers, corvettes, even converted cargo vessels bristling with bolt-on weapons. Each one was a testament to human engineering philosophy. If it works, use it. If it breaks, fix it. If you can't fix it, weld more steel to it and try again. The tide of battle turned as more hegemony commanders began to understand. They stopped trying to outthink the Devourers and started copying human tactics. Instead of sophisticated targeting computers, they used manual fire control. Instead of adaptive armor, they mounted crude but effective kinetic barriers. When the battle ended, the Devourer fleet was scattered debris drifting through space. The hegemony had lost nearly half its forces, but humanity's casualty rate was significantly lower. The Defiance, her hull scarred and blackened, but still fighting, had personally accounted for 17 enemy vessels. Admiral Zethkari found Admiral Chen in the Defiance's cramped utilitarian bridge. Everything looked jury-rigged and improvised, held together with welds and determination. "How?" he asked simply. Chen smiled grimly. "You build ships like artwork. Beautiful, perfect, sophisticated. We build them like tools. Tools break, so you make them easy to fix. Tools wear out, so you make them easy to replace. And sometimes the simplest tool is the right one for the job." She gestured to her battered ship. The Devourers spent eons learning to counter advanced technology. They never learned to deal with a species too stubborn to know when they're outmatched. As rescue ships arrived to collect survivors, Zethkari realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. They didn't build perfect ships. They built ships that could take a beating and keep fighting. In the aftermath, human engineering principles spread throughout the hegemony fleet. Ships became more robust, weapons more reliable, tactics more adaptable. The galaxy learned that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most elegant one. It was the one that worked. And when the next crisis came, they would be ready, not because they had the best technology, but because they had learned to think like humans, to build like humans, to fight like humans, to never give up no matter how outmatched they seemed.